good evening and Wajika Khalsa. This is thanks to Pawan and Manraj for having us here and Tikreeb organizing this with them. This is one of the few sort of events I've been to where the host actually didn't pick the topic. They asked me what I want to talk about, so in fact she was just asking me before we started, why did you pick this topic? I said, just hold on for 5 minutes and I'll talk about it. I ended up picking this because if you ask me regarding any issues we are facing in life, eventually we have to come down to some sort of a referencing point, some core values. What is it that helps us figure out what to do in any critical decision in life? That's why I picked this. What really, whether you're sitting here working at Accenture or some, and a lot of things might be on your mind depending on which news you listened to last week, or to family issues, to community issues, to personal growth and career issues. Is there a framework which is born out of Sikh-ing? And there are going to be several, so this is a process, not the process. So I thought, let me talk about, if you yourself are not living a harmonious life, then anyone, any news, any noise will come and enter you and disturb you even more. If you are collected and calm and connected, then anything which comes your way, you'll figure out how to deflect it or leverage it. So I thought, let's talk about developing ourselves. Usually I'm doing talks on leaderships and certain political issues or particular issue of Guru Granth Sahib, but this is quite interpretive, and I'll talk about at the end where I actually got these ideas from. But essentially, that's where the topic is born. What is it that needs to be done in order to live a harmonious life? And you can read Stephen Covey on it, you can read M. Scott Peck on it, or whoever else you want to. Here is another way to look at how to develop that within you in the, as M. Scott Peck calls it, in the age of anxiety. So you're all living through certain traumas or certain anxieties, or what he calls it, since he's psychiatrist, he says we are all between character disorders and neurosis. So we are all in between somewhere, and we got to figure out whatever this quote-unquote balance means. So that's where this topic is born, and I put this thing on the title slide because those of you who work in this building, you got a really nice coffee shop downstairs, which is one of my favorite coffee shops of the chains. Otherwise, I prefer local coffee. And then sometimes when you're talking, you'll write something on a napkin that this is what I want to do, or you might be sitting somewhere else, you might make a note. But I don't know how many times we go back and look at those notes, what we decided to do. If you, let's say, if you got married in the last couple of years, maybe you talked about your big dreams before you got married, but you didn't visit them. At work, we are forced to. They're going to ask you for quarterly reports and semi-annual and annual reports, and there's a metric you work with. But where do these napkin dreams go? Well, either you don't even remember we made those notes. I recently picked up mine, which my wife and I talked about 7 months ago. I was like, oh shit, I have to work on this. So the point is, we all have this in us, that I know I need to do something with it, but we don't revisit them. So this is one way which we'll talk about, that how can we revisit. And we all have great dreams. Whatever ideas are, there are no bad ideas. In fact, these days they say ideas are a dime a dozen. So the ideas which we can implement for ourselves, that's what matters. Okay, so that's where this is coming out of. And I'm going to start with this quote from Pune Singh. And let's, actually can I get a volunteer to read this? If you can read it, it's kind of small. Can somebody read this for me?
I'll read it.
Go ahead, thanks.
Present times through which we are passing tend towards impersonality. Homely affections and attachments are giving place to legal arguments in favor of sex-based relation on which heartless economic basis and to protect ship what is called the independence of male and female. The mental forces driving towards vague, impersonal and dead generalizations both in religion, art and society. Pune Singh, Spirit of the Sea.
Thank you. I don't know if you correlate with this, but I do see a lot of this stuff. This cartoon is kind of funny. It said, the world is getting so impersonal, and she's talking through Skype, I guess, and her husband or spouse is saying, tell me more. And I correlate to that too. Most of the time, since I travel a lot, I'm talking via Skype or some other go-to meeting or whatever it is. But I don't know if you feel this. I mean, essentially, A lot of impersonal stuff is driving our life. A lot of it. And we are all interested in this, whatever the quote-unquote independence of, I added both sexes because I don't want to talk about one or the other. It's everyone wants to be independent, whatever that means, and independence is good, but what does that mean? What is your responsibility in being independent? And essentially what this is driving toward, according to Puran Singh, is that we end up with what is happening in religion, art, and society, which is what culture is essentially. There are combinations of these things, that we end up with very vague generalizations of everything. So, a common way of presenting that would be, if we don't want to have an in-depth conversation or a tough conversation, we would just say, well, I know that's how she is. Or at work even, let's just agree to disagree. It's become such a cliche to do that. Instead of saying, well, can we have a more depthful conversation? Let's figure out, what does this really mean? Let's figure out, can we spend an hour or 2 hours, or can we look at people who have studied this? For relationships, we are not doing this. For work, we do it. For relationships, we don't do it. Whether it's at home, or in a community members, or among colleagues even. But if you're forced by work, then we'll do it. Then we'll go to the most specialized training on it to go figure it out. But in life, we are not doing it. So I and he wrote this 100 years ago, by the way. So guess what? It's a human behavior issue again. The outer manifestations of our behaviors keep changing, but actually the intrinsic behaviors remains the same. So what happens in your household or in your relationship, or your relationship with yourself, and that's where the focus is going to be mostly today. What is my relationship with myself? Do I even know myself? I expect, if you're married or if you have a great relationship with your spouse, you expect them to know everything about you, right? Especially if you've been in a relationship for, a few years. And I'm like, man, I don't even know myself. How can he or she know who I am? So we really don't know who I am. I really don't know who I am. Because I change. And there's an old joke about it. I'll share that with some of you are already looking too serious. You gotta relax a bit. There's a 10th anniversary dinner. 2 spouses, I don't want to be sexist, so I'm going to say spouses. They go out for dinner, and one spouse says to the other, you're just not the person I married. And the other spouse looks at the one who said that. He's like, yeah, you spent 10 years changing me. So do you really know who you are? And I know it's a cliched question, but it's a philosophical question. People in religion ask this all the time. People in self-help development books are asking this all the time. So, there must be something to it, and we'll explore it a little bit today. Do you really know who you are? Or is every relationship going to become transactional? Impersonal is transactional, basically. Give and take type stuff we talk about. In relationship, we also say, I grew up listening to this, where people say, relationships are 50-50. I'm like, that's so bad. You're already giving only 50%? I thought it's 100-100. You got to give 100% to make things work. So impersonal stuff, how do we, even in divinity issues, even in religion, it's become so impersonal. So this is the structure which is around us. Religion is not personal anymore. It's become purely institutionalized. Like in a Sikh angle, if you look at it, you pay somebody to do your part, and you pay somebody to get you married, and you pay somebody to name your child, and you pay somebody to cremate you. It's really funny stuff. Think about it. So when religion, art, and society is being talked about, I'm essentially saying life has become very transactional. Life has become very impersonal. And how do we bring the person in it? The old, or one of the ads, as some of you are into that business possibly, the HP ads used to be a couple of years ago when they were trying to reinvent themselves. Can we put PC in the PC, the personal computer? Because they're becoming impersonal. Same thing in relationship. Where is the person in the personhood? And that's what we want to explore. So, let me ask you guys this. The title of the talk is Harmony. What does this word mean to you guys? And there's just questions to ask you, just implore you to think about it. What does harmony mean to you? There are no right or wrong answers, by the way.
Tuning oneself.
Sorry?
In tune
with oneself. Very nice cliched answer, which I like because religious words are strong. Yeah. So tune with yourself, which assumes then we are out of tune.
Obviously.
Great. What else? Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I'd say sort of authenticity with yourself.
Authenticity.
You know what you're saying and what you're doing
Yeah.
is not contradictory, or your intentions and what you do are very much the same.
Yeah. Intention, authenticity. Yeah, authentic. Being authentic has become a huge thing in the last few years as well. Genuine. Okay, good. What else?
I think you're right. There isn't probably one answer, but what I would say is it's to do with understanding your own values and beliefs and trying to align those to the values and beliefs of the spiritual path, the tradition you're following. For me, I think it's to do with aligning your values and beliefs with those that are dear to you, and ensuring there's harmony between those three sets.
Okay. So intersecting those three areas and the operating word is values. Then, how many of us sit down and figure out what are my values? Or is the current TV channel you watch or who you hang out is defining your values? It's a very depthful stuff here. We actually don't figure out what my values are. Okay, good. What else? Yeah.
A peaceful existence.
Peaceful existence. What does that mean? Everyone wants peace now. Oh, you're having a piece of it too. Peaceful, whatever that means. Peaceful existence. Good. I don't know what that means anymore. Because the most violent people use this word now. Feel like we are doing this for people. Even UN says it. They have a peacekeeping force. So what does this really mean? Mahatma Gandhi used this word too, right? But when he was asked why is India working towards, after atomic bomb was already in Singh, he said, well, for Indian defense. So it's something which is confusing for me, when I'm looking at what people are saying about peace. Haji.
I think being truthful to yourself in whatever you do, like honesty, because a lot of times we try to fit other people's models of what we should be, and until we kind of find ourselves, in that way, we're always going to kind of not be at peace with ourselves, because
truthful, the idea of truth, or whatever that means to you, and there are multiple truths these days, right? Isn't that what the war is about? Whose truth matters most? Some in the religious, and in even if you look at corporate world, that's the idea. Our truth is better. We have a better data. What does it say? High performance delivered. It's a competing ideas. That's what I'm trying to say. Whether it's religion, whether it's companies, and so whose truth matters most? And some will go to the extent of saying your truth is not even the truth. So it's again, it becomes battle of ideas. Whose truth? Okay. What else?
Isolation.
Isolation.
Mental isolation.
Mental isolation. So you're mortified. Okay. Explain that.
If you say you want harmony, you may not like the surroundings, then you have to just believe the best for yourself. Because if you turn around and say that, I don't know, if you take some kind of a leader who can come up with some new way of doing things, they always had an isolated path, and then eventually they wouldn't go over. You have to be really strong in yourself.
Okay, so you actually mean isolation in that sense. Okay, it's more of again knowing your values, because isolationism hasn't worked in the world very well, and you guys know very well being on a big island here. Isolationism actually allows problems to get further. But what you really mean is knowing who you are and not allowing other things to distract you from what you need to do.
If you want to do something in life, whatever it is,
Okay.
don't do this, don't do that.
Sounds good. Okay, what else? Anyone else? Haji, last one, then we move on.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness. So you already have all the answers?
We try and answer them
Oh,
for yourself
okay.
first.
So what do you mean by self-awareness?
So knowing what you're trying to do, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. And
So
then
asking a lot of questions to not others but yourself. Do we do that generally? Introspection is really not generally there, but I agree. It has. I mean, I want to have fun with this word. Even if you pronounce this in Punjabi, it becomes harmony. We have created a self-defeatist attitude. And that's the problem. We actually think the whole world is just done, man. Things just suck. So how is harmony going to come if it's already dead? And we have harmony already. And nothing is going to get done. We just suck. Gurdwara sucks. Parents suck. Everything sucks. My wife sucks. Or my husband sucks. Whatever it is. And now the kids are growing up with this vocabulary. So that's the culture we have developed. That actually things are just sucky. But really, are they? Or is it just you and what you need to do? It's your attitude, and other things in life. So, okay. Well, here's a dictionary definition. Actually, the word comes from Greek, which literally means to join, or creating joints. So, obviously, you have to join certain things, and some of you alluded to it. Aligning, synchronizing, similar word, they're synonyms. But you have to join something, so which means there's a disconnect. So, and whenever there's a disconnect, even if it's not physically separated, what do we say? Let's say we say I have a dislocated shoulder. It's still connected, but it's dislocated. It's very painful. So we might be living our life, but if it's disconnected or dislocated, it's very painful. So outwardly it looks like you're fine, but you're not fine because you're dislocated. So harmony has something to do with it, that you have certain agreements and accords, especially in a relation, and it's consistent, orderly, or pleasing arrangement of parts, congruity. Essentially, the etymology is to join, which is actually, in Indic vocabulary, the word jog has exactly the same meaning. It's not yoga as a discipline, as people practice as a yogic exercise. Literal meaning of the word yog, which is jog, is exactly the same word. It means to meet, to connect. So whenever the word comes up in religious vocabulary, don't automatically assume it's about yoga. Yoga happens to be the name of an exercise which people adopted, that there was connection as well. Okay, so if harmony means to join certain things, some of you, and all of you perhaps, have had experiences where it's a process then. It requires you to first realize that there's a disconnect, and then you have to do certain things and not just think about it, and to join certain things willfully. So there's a political will which has to be exercised to join. Even for marriage we do that, for relationship we do that, right? People might say certain things to you, but if you think she's the one for you, you're going to go for it. It requires you to do something. Similarly, at work we do it. If you feel this is the right one, then you go for that job, or for that project. Or you walk out of the project if you think this is going to misalign you. So what I'm trying to get at is that harmony does not happen on its own. It actually is a verb. And guess what verbs are? They require activism. They require you to do certain things and not just sit and hope that grace will occur one day, as Newton's apple fell and he figured it out, and your apple will fall and you will go to New York or something, I don't know. The point is, it requires you to do certain things. Harmony requires a lot of work. It's just like, if you're untrained for a job, you got to go get the training. So it's some level of training is required to get the harmony done. So what's on your mind this week? Let's talk about this week. What have you been thinking about? Nothing? That's mental isolation. What happened today?
Pope resigned.
Pope resigned, see? And everyone's talking about it. I tweeted about it too. I said, the Catholic observants are ready for African or Latino Pope. Are the Sikhs ready for a non-Punjabi Jathedar? This shows you how not aligned we are. We are still very Punjabi, right? So what else is going on? Hanji?
It's snowing.
It's snowing. Yeah, I brought it from New Jersey. There was about to be a storm there, and I took an early flight. And then we went through Sandy storm 2 weeks or 2 months ago there. And I was discussing with Jagdeep that I was telling him that, our power was out for almost 10 days. And guess what happened here at his house? The power was out for 2 days. So I brought snow and the power out in here, I guess. Okay, what else is going on? What's on your mind?
The hanging of Afsal Guru.
Yeah, the hanging of the Guru. So the international news is coming in, right? Who's for it, who's against it, the politics behind it. And what gets lost is what Human Rights Watch said. You know, we know what Congress said, we know what Amitabh Bachchan says, we know what Arundhati Roy said, we know what BJP said, but what Human Rights Watch says is this is a wrong trend for Indian law. And that gets lost, and everything else is getting the news. Who's for it and who's against it. Okay, what else is on your mind? Surely it can't just be the international news. Nothing? Or it's too personal? Okay. Nothing on your mind? No, nothing about work, relationship, kids? No? Wow. Okay. Oh, it's too private. Should we stick to it's too private, or you're actually there is nothing in your mind?
Well, I think it's
Huh?
private.
It's private, yeah. Well, I'm not asking for what it is. I'm not saying you have a confession here. But I'm just saying, sorry? Popes resigned, yeah. Is that a divine intervention? Anyway, I won't go there. Because, you know, after the legacy of John Paul II, where was he taking it? Huh?
You were the hard act to follow.
Yeah. Andy,
I guess work is on my mind.
work is on your mind? Yeah. Traveling is on your mind? Point is that there's constantly stuff going in our mind. In fact, let me just put this up, you know. I have too much to do. My 5-year-old now tells me that I'm stressed. This is the culture we have created. He actually says this. I asked him something to do, he's like, oh, I gotta do this too. So what is going on? How are we deciding things? That a 5-year-old feels stressed, and we all feel stressed. Or most of us, maybe some of you don't, but I'll say most of us. You know, too much to do, don't know how to balance work life with play life or home life or whatever it might be. I don't know. There are too many options. I don't know what to do. You know, we say, you know, we go through this. You're sitting at a fork sometime. Like they both sound good. Which one do I choose? You know, what compass do you use to figure this stuff out? Or you're just saying, let me just do, you know, for now this, and which is what most of us do, because we haven't figured out where to really go. What are my values? And other things like this. Some of you said this. Can I ever have a peaceful existence? I don't know. What does this mean? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Maybe it's not meant to be. Because everyone who is actually trying to develop peace in the world, some of them have to give up their life, which is actually very violent. So are we caught up in cliches only, or are we really seeking certain things? Yeah. Anyway, point is, at home front, there are so many things to be done. You know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I live in, you know, my wife, I don't know how she does all these things. I think she's a superwoman. I don't know what. She works, she makes some money. Yeah. She takes care of the kids. My in-law, you know, her in-laws live with us, so she's doing that. I'm mostly traveling, and she's taking kids. Generally, if I'm home, then I take care of them and bath them, bathe them. I don't know how she does all this. And other day I was having a conversation with her. I'm like, so when are you taking breaks? I need to give you some break. You know, can you go out with your girlfriends at least once a week and have a nice dinner with them? And maybe once a month we should go do this. The point is, there's so much to be done. Are you taking time out for yourself? If you're not, then start doing it. And the other thing is, if you're taking too much time out of yourself, then you won't even know what to do with that time. So guess what happens then? You pick up the phone when you're by yourself and you're like, let me get hold of somebody. You know what that means? It means you don't like your own company. And that's where the peace idea really kicks in. So either we have no time for ourselves, or we have too much time on our own. वो कहते पंजाबी ज़्यादा बंदा वेला बैठा, वेले भी बड़े बैठे ना समझ नहीं आती की करिए फिर कहते let's do this, ये भी कर लो, वो भी कर लो. Or they are so busy that my Nanaji actually said this to me about 15 years ago. He goes, you can't even sit still and eat a proper meal. What's wrong with you? It's true. I used to be like that. I'm like, let me just get this done. It's a waste of time. Let me just finish in 5 minutes. And then until when he said that, I had to think about it. I'm like, you know, I can't even enjoy what I'm eating. So make time for things. And how do we decide what do I make time for? Well, it's going to come down to you. And let's talk about that. And this is the core of the idea I want to present. I mean, I'm putting 5 steps here. It's not like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits or other things, but you can look at however you want to, but it's just a way to present it. And this is derived out of Gurbani, and I'll talk about it where I got it from. But the idea is, whether you are on Wall Street or whatever your equivalent here is, or at home, or in religious world, art world, anyone will tell you the first thing you need is discipline. I mean, it's not a magic or a coincidence that 95% of Fortune 500 company CEOs are at work at 7:30 in the morning. Yeah. I mean, it's discipline is discipline. Whatever it is, whatever you want to do, it has to be persistent and consistent. And in fact, I just want to quote this guy. He says, seek freedom and become captive of your desires. Seek discipline and find your liberty. So the point is, if you are just thinking about it all the time, it's not going to happen. It's like Michael Jordan saying, I want to be a great player, but never going on the court every day for hours and shooting and playing, and eventually, guess what? He's flying. So it has to be persistent and consistent. If you choose whatever it is that I need to exercise, if you don't do it, well, it's not going to go anywhere. You're going to keep accumulating that fat, whatever you're eating. And I love my brownies too, but I got to do something about it. So discipline is the key. And discipline does not mean fanaticism, by the way. Discipline just means doing something, quote unquote, religiously. And we use that as a phrase. The word taram gets used in Indic vocabulary a lot. Don't think it means religion. I mean, it's a combination of what they say, righteousness, discipline, religion, with a lowercase r, not a capital R. And that's the idea here. You gotta be disciplined about it. Not discipline as a religious discipline only. It's something you do persistently and consistently. And people will say, when we are looking for great individuals, we'll say, this person is very consistent or consistent. Look at their track record. This is how they've been. This is why they are where they are. And what do we say to people who are changing their mind all the time? Unreliable. They're like, this person's confused, they're unreliable. So anything you're trying to do in your life, you gotta have a discipline. If you want to be a horse rider, it's not going to happen. If you want to be an astronaut, it's not. If you want to be a surgeon, it's not going to happen or so on. If you want to be the best sarod player in the world, well, you got to pick up the sarod and go learn from. Well, Ali Akbar Khan is not anymore, but I would have gone to him. He was my favorite sarod player. So the point is, you got to go and get a disciplined training. Okay, so that's the idea here. But I put a few other things here. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. If somebody is forcing you into a discipline, it's not going to work. If you adopted that discipline, it will work. And that's a huge difference. So I use the word love for it. If you are lovingly doing something, if somebody is created a compulsion, you're going to get sick of it very quickly, whether it's at religion or at work or at home. And it happens with parents, it happens with spouses. They're like, man, this sucks. No, again, we use I'm using that word because we do this. So keep this in mind. Discipline is something you adopt, not somebody who gives it to you. When another person gives it to you, you'll say, maybe I'll try it. But if you figure it out that this is for me, guess what? You'll be on that treadmill all the time. But anyway, I'm just using exercise example. You can apply that to anything. So keep this in mind. The idea of love is something of that nature, something which you are doing with devotion. It's your thing, not someone else's. Maybe you learned it from someone. Maybe somebody gave you an idea, but enforcement is you. It's self-enforced. Yeah? Okay. So what happens then is, and let's talk about that, and this is where the difference is. A compulsion is that you're always wondering, is this really for me? I know this guy told me. It just happens in religion all the time. This happens at work all the time. This happens when we are going to university. Sometimes you're trying to become whatever you became because your parents asked you to. This happens in religious traditions because you're following something for a while and you're like, oh man, this wasn't for me, and then you leave it alone. So if it's on compulsion, you'll always be questioning it. If you're doing it out of love, then you figure out how to make it happen, even if you only have even if you're busy 24 hours. That's the point. Then you make time. Then you integrate into your lifestyle. You don't do it as a task. That's the difference. That's the discipline difference. Self-centered is compulsion, whereas collectively centered is loving. So you don't do it because you think it's going to just benefit you. You're going to start doing it because you think it's going to benefit everything around you. You become that radiating greatness instead of self-centered greatness. And we see this on people who consistently do things. Now here's a very interesting difference. If your discipline is under compulsion, you will be very goal-oriented. That's why frustration comes. If it is born out of love, you'll be mission-oriented. You really don't care whether you achieve your metric or not. You're going to keep doing it because you love doing it. And you'll see the greatest activists in the world, the truly religious people in the world, that's where they are. They are not trying to get to a particular destination because it's not enforced by others. They are doing it because they are adopting it. A truly remarkable geniuses in the world are like this. The world will tell them that they are worthless until a few years later they discover they were the genius because they were not goal-oriented, they were mission-oriented. And guess what? When you're mission-oriented, you might actually not achieve a particular goal, but you might actually achieve 50,000 other goals from a worldly angle, or from a discovery, or invention, or an art angle. So the difference is, again, if you're under compulsion, you'll be trying to meet that deadline only. Whereas R&D labs rarely work like that. That's why there's always a fight at the workplace between R&D and sales. Sales people have to have a hard deadline because that's how they're measured. And R&D people are like, it doesn't work like this. I can put 10 scientists and tell them, even feed them there and put sofa beds there. Guess what? It's not going to work because that's creativity work. So that's the difference. Okay, sense of bondage, sense of liberation, and I want to talk about this last part. Under compulsion, you just follow, Punjabi lakir de fakir. You're just following the letter of the law, whether at work, whether in religion, or even in sports. Whereas when you lovingly do things, you're also following the spirit behind that law. If you follow just this, you become fanatic. If you follow this, you become very powerful. And that's the difference between the two things. So when you follow the spirit, law is already in it. But you're also following the law, the spirit behind the law. Not just that you are. So another way to see it in a corporate world, this is about compliance. Guess what this is about? You will always exceed the compliance. You'll be doing much bigger things with it. So if you're just doing things for compliance, and I'll use a religious example here. Some Sikhs will say, I follow the Rad, but you don't see a behavior change. So they're just complying. They forgot the spirit behind the law. We do this for taxes. A lot of us do tax reduction, but some of us go to tax evasion. They'll say, I'm trying to do, and sometimes they hire companies like this one to do that. I'm not sure. The point is, you see the difference between the two, and I'm spending way too much time on this because this is the basis for things. The point here is, discipline is something which is born out of you. If somebody else is doing this for you, you'll be writing. You think you're going somewhere, and you will move somewhere, but it's not going to be the most explosive potential you got. Yeah, okay. So let's go to the second part, wisdom. Generally, let's talk about wisdom quickly. People confuse the word wisdom with knowledge. Wisdom is not becoming Wikipedia. I know that used to be the classical thing that people who can recite more things and give you all the answers we thought they were wise. Not really. It just means they have more data than you do. And guess what has happened in today's world? We collect so much data, now companies are specializing in analytics because they have learned that collecting data actually doesn't solve problems. So wisdom is not collection of data. You need to create your own analytics, to put it in today's terminology. So wisdom asks questions like this. It's not just facts and figures, data, information. You start going towards, and I run some teacher trainings as well. So generally we ask what questions, then we go to why questions, which is sort of where we start. But eventually you have to go to imaginative questions. where you place yourself in a particular scenario and you ask, what will I do? That's what decides your value system. When you just say, for example, who is, I don't know, Afzal Guru? So you will get some data. And if you ask, why was he hanged? You will get certain data. And the question will be, what if I was sitting in the 3-panel judge? What would I decide? Now your values kick in. You see the difference? You have to put yourself in a scenario and see how will I decide this. This is where you have to crunch the data you have to figure out who you really are. And that's your values, that's your doctrine. And we don't do this. We generally say, do this or do that, but we don't imagine being in that situation. Role-playing essentially. Put yourself in that role, how would I do this? If I was a judge deciding, if I, we know what Harinder said, that's why, and we know what Congress and BJP is saying. I'm just using an example. Okay, so, in fact, I heard a phrase once, which I kind of like. It said, wisdom is practice of knowledge. And I kind of like that, because wisdom is not collection or accumulation. You got to go crunch the information to the relevancy of the scenario you are in, not to the world, because something else might be relevant to your neighbor. It's to your relevancy and crunching the data, the information. So where does wisdom really comes in? I'm going to use, we're going to come back to this eventually, but basically this is big thing. And it becomes a roadmap for us. But here is the thing, some people say if you have a compass, you know where the north is. And then if you don't have a right discipline, you're not going there then. So that's why discipline is the first thing. But having compass is not enough. You know why it's not having, it's good to have a wisdom, but if you don't know what to do with it, and as an example I'm going to use, if you figured out where you need to go, what if whatever you're pointing out on the way, you have swamps? So having a compass is still not enough, but it's good to have that. Which means you have to read, you have to listen, you have to be aware of your surroundings and yourself. Then you can probably create which journey you need to take. But that compass is still not enough. So anything on the wisdom so far? Okay, we'll continue on the 5 angles. Now, I'm about to talk about effort, but here is scenario. Generally, when we want to do something, we start here. We just want to go do it. We love Nike's slogan on that instance, and just do it. What this is saying is before you do something, you got to do some homework. Don't just become a busybody. And generally, we are busybodies. We hear an idea, we read a book, we heard something, we start aping it. Well, guess what? The guy who did it, he didn't just ape it, he discovered it. So you have to have your own discovery, and you can't just emulate or copy it. It works in advertisement, whoever you like and whatever car they drive, you try to buy that car, right? That's advertisement. But in developing yourself, it doesn't work, because effort is a third level. Once you have created a discipline, once you have certain knowledges, and you're trying to pursue those knowledges in your own practice, now it's time to make effort. This is where you figure out what's for you. You don't then figure out what your parents want, what the community wants from you, but now you're ready to figure out what you're going to do. You're going to make effort now, not before that. This is where you want to become busy. And that's other ways of saying that you actually you're intellectually sharpening yourself. But let's say an example of this would be, you decide, I don't know, that I want to be a loving husband. Yeah, I'm saying this because most men are not. So if you decide that, you have to do something about it. You can't just tell her at a dinner, Valentine's Day is coming, that next year I'll be nicer. Well, it's a step, but it's not going to do it. Because guess what? Maybe within 24 hours, you're going to lapse. Or you can apply that to anyone, any commitments you have in any relationship. The reason it doesn't happen is because we haven't gone through the discipline of changing the behavior. Recognition is one thing, then you have to change the behavior, then you have to go read few things or talk to somebody on how to change this behavior, and then you have to allow time to change it, and that's the effort. So before you commit to somebody, recognize what it takes, and then say, perhaps, I'm just saying as an example, I've recognized this is what I've done about it. We do this at work. And can you give me 3 months to change this behavior? That's the effort part. Not declaration, not something which sounds nice over a Thai dinner or something. But you gotta make an effort and give yourself time. That can give me 3 months or give me a year. I'm gonna really work on this to change my behavior towards however I've been at home or in the relationship. At work they'll make you do it. They're like, if you don't fix this by now, guess what? You're out the window or the door or whatever it is. Some people do throw them literally, but that's not the point. So that's the effort part. All I'm trying to make a point here is effort is the third step, not the first step. It has to be work before you do the effort. Okay? And the fourth, I'm using the word grace here, and let's quickly cover that. All I'm trying to say here is that don't wait for grace to occur. Grace is something which is always occurring. It's actually aligning yourself to what you have learned about yourself. Most people traditionally will tell you, I'm waiting for serendipity to occur. So grace sounds religious, let's use a different word. What is serendipity? Great things happening when you least expect them. So don't wait for serendipity. Yes?
But what about the kind of religious aspect or the spiritual aspect of grace?
Sure.
And how does that impact?
Well, I'll bring it to, I said listen to the signs of, I like the word force, I didn't put God there.
Because I think we secularize the whole debate. We don't really want to talk about that necessarily.
No, I'll talk about it. I said I use the word force here, but you can apply it in Sikh context. So in Sikh context, grace is not something which you wait for again. That's why I'm presenting it this way. The whole thing is a Sikh-ing process, right? As I understand the idea of Gur Prasad, another word for that in Sikh tradition is karam. The Persian word karam means grace, Sanskrit means deeds. And we always use the Sanskrit meaning, whereas in Guru Granth Sahib both meanings come. And we have to apply it properly. So the idea of grace in Sikhi, as I understand, is we don't have a discriminating God. So how can you say the one is not being graceful to you? If the example used is, let's use sunlight. It's coming. If your window is shut, you need to open it. It's going to come in. It's coming in every house. But if you have your own window closed, don't blame God for it.
But it will come at a different angle.
It will come at different angles because that's your state of existence in life. So, some people will open little windows, some will keep it open all the time, other might put curtain on it, if I were to continue with that example. Yeah, but the idea of grace is things happen when you work towards them. Things don't happen just by what we classically call prayer. Or let's apply it to workplace. Classically, I said. We can apply, and you can disagree, I'm just presenting as I understand it. We can apply to workplace. You can just keep hoping, either by bribing or by other ways, which is what we do in religion. We are trying to bribe God all the time. You try this at work, eventually it will get caught up and things are not going to get done. You might succeed for a while, but this is what the religious people try to do. We are always trying to bribe God. That's how I look at it. That's bribing. I didn't know God was a power-hungry maniac, if you want to use that word. But the point is, and this is the idea, engaging with your surroundings. And if you want to be classically religious about it, actually in Sikhi we believe there is no personhood of God, or Vaheguru, or Ikko Onkar is the word which is exactly from scriptures, Guru Granth Sahib. It says Ikko Onkar is among people. So engage with wherever you are, with people and your surroundings. And you will see and you will visualize it there. But we don't do that. We wait for some grace to occur from, and we always look up, by the way. And we know very well we are on Earth, which is round, surrounded by the solar systems. So again, a classic grace upro aa rahi hai. You know why? Because that's the classic of religion. We go up. We're going to go to the heavens. The same idea. Well, not in, as I understand, Sikh process. And applying it to here, and this is the word used. Even startup companies use this word now. What is this word? Ecosystem. The communities are looking at this. Can we create an ecosystem? What does that mean? It means facilitating everything, facilitating growth of all kinds. If you work in a company which is only interested in bottom line, you know it's just a temporary place for you. If they're also developing you, you stay there. That's the ecosystem. Same thing at home. And if everything is one person's rule, it's not an ecosystem, it's called dictatorship. And we have a lot of those in our communities as well. Ecosystem is where you're allowing different things to grow at their own pace, and you facilitate the environment for growth. And I look at grace as being that. People who have grace in their life, that's exactly what they do. They are not worried about how you practice your thing or how you work. They are not micromanagers, if I may call it from a corporate angle. They are, again, enablers. So enabling someone is a graceful act. Telling them what to do is preaching, is micromanagement. Okay, if that helps. All right. So the last thing, the word truth is used, and let me put a note on it because truth word gets used religiously quite a bit, in politics as well, in journalism as well. I've written it with a capital T as well, which means this is not something which is your reality or my reality, whatever the ultimate reality is. There are certain absolute truths, but I cannot say that your experience is not valid. So this is not about personal experience of yours. Example I like to use here is if you are going up on, I don't know, some tower, and you are on the first floor and somebody's on the 7th floor, and let's say somebody went into low Earth orbit, everyone's going to have different view of life. That's what we have. It depends on where you are at what altitude. But I'm not talking about that here. So your experience is purely valid. I'm not going to say it's not true. But this truth is where everyone's experience at some level is same. So that's a harmony idea eventually. And this is where I'm essentially, if you want to apply corporate words, it becomes more about collective goodwill. Punjabi ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ word है barkat. They say goodwill occurs when you are not doing a PR for it. So when you are seeking things, when you do things, your behavior creates goodwill. And companies are starting to look at it for a while now, right? And and you'll notice this when some companies for sale, they'll say actually the market value is this, but the goodwill value is this. So this is where the goodwill kicks in, where you can read this, the purpose, drag, all this stuff is basically more data, but essentially what this is saying is you actually don't see contradictions in life also at that point. You then start seeing paradoxes in life, which are the same things, but the attitude is different. Contradiction makes it a very negative thing, that you're trying to convince the other person. Paradox is you see a beauty in both things. That's the thing about that. So poets use that word more, but lawyers will say contradiction. It's the same thing, it's an attitude change. Still two different things are operating, but I like to invoke Guru Nanak here. He says, I feel great even when I see people who are not on the path. Yeah, he says, Vismad Ujjar, Vismad Rah. Vismad is that wonderful, awesome feeling. He says, people who are on the path and people are not on the path, I feel great looking at both things. Which means the attitude is very different now. Again, this is something, what we're trying to say, you're complementing life, not contradicting life. The words of this nature can be used. But let's quickly apply this now. What does this really mean? So the 5 steps I mentioned, and let's talk about its application. So this is where we are. You guys know all this stuff. I'm trying to bring a Sikh angle to it. And essentially, what I'm saying is, religion or the process is not just for work or spirituality. You can apply this to anything in life. And guess what? If any of these elements, and I've used 8 of these here, and other authors use other things as well. If any of this you are lacking in, let's say you're scoring yourself from 1 to 5 in all of these. And if you are 4 on all of them, you will be cruising. Even if you are 1 in one of them, you're not going to cruise because it's not going to be a wheel. That's the idea. The wheels only work when they're all on the same path. So you could be making a lot of money, you might be spiritual, but if you don't know how to talk to your kids and your wife, life is it's not going to be cool. Wheels don't roll unless they are on the same axle or on the same spokes, whatever you want to call it. Keep following me? So if you rate yourself 1 in everything, you still will be enjoying life. But if you say 5 in something, 3 in something, 4 in something, it's not a wheel. It's going to have a lot of trouble. It's going to require more fuel to push that car forward. So if you are 3 in everything, you're still cruising nicely. 4 is even better. 5 is obviously the best. The point is, we have skewed data in our life. We have worked hard on particular things, generally career, in some cases relationships. But what this is saying is there are a lot of things to be developed, and there are 8 ways to look at it. And if you score exactly same in all 8 areas, then life is progressing, then life is somewhat smooth. So that's what you need to look at. How do, and whichever area you, let's say you are 3 in some, and 1 in something, and 4 in something else, then your job is, the discipline kicks in here. How to take that 1 to 3. You got to work on it religiously, find out what you need to do about it, then start making efforts, and then grace you can wait for, or you can work towards. And then, once that comes to 3, that's harmony. That's how you're synchronizing things. So let me use a classical example here. If somebody, quote unquote, is a pumpkin leader, and they don't have a good relationship at home, I tell them, go work on it, buddy. Because I don't know how you can discover God if you haven't discovered it in your wife. That's what Gurbani says, to be very honest. We have to be on this wheel. The life is not lived in isolation in that sense. It has to be an integration. Everything is synchronous. Okay, the other way to, let's go towards religion there. How are we going to apply this to religion? Well, you ask yourself, I'm going to tell you, here are some questions. If you say you are religious, are you still fearful? Or are you full of love? I mean, I jokingly say this, but it's sad truth. Most religious people are always very scary. So I don't know how religious they are. They're always, they tell you so what's wrong with you and how much more wrong will happen to you if you don't do certain things. I'm like, man, something's wrong with this. I don't want to follow that religion. Yeah? So, being religious is the same thing. Are you becoming more inclusive or exclusive? Are you still more judgment or accommodating? Are you active or are you passive? Some certain things I've written. So the point is, whatever religion you are following, make sure you're not following somebody's interpretation, but you're trying to follow what it's developing for you. Now, if you are just a conformist in religion, remember the first step of discipline? You'll become fanatic, because it is compulsion. If you're doing it out of love, you will become an incredible personality born out of that tradition, which we find in all traditions. We'll find fanatics and we'll find incredible. You find the same tradition gave us Rumi, for example. If you haven't read him, even in a romantic sense, go discover it. Because he is incredible. It's the same tradition which produced some of the, like Aurangzeb, for example. And they're both followers of law. That's why I'm using those 2 examples on purpose. They both followed the law. One followed it out of compulsion, other followed it out of love. And look what they became. And they were both successful, but in a very different way. Look at how world perceives them, and look at least how Sikhs perceive them, and you get the point. Okay, so you can apply this to religion, and then you can apply this in other areas. We'll talk about it. Same thing with the judgment, and then we talk about that. I'm not talking about judgment of, we have small conversations about people. But some people have doctrinally serious conversation how you're going straight to hell. No, I grew up there and I still hear that. Not just among Sikhs. I used to work with a guy, Bob, and he used to say, after a year or so, he would come down to the engineering group and he'll say, hey, are you coming for the Bible study group? I'm like, no, not really, man. So he asked me like 3-4 times. I finally went with him. And, they were having discussion that day on Book of Job. Yeah, those of you are familiar with that. And, I gave him my input. I said, see, he got tested so much, but he didn't break. And that's religion. And nowhere in that book it talked about how many times he prayed and when. That was a personal thing for him. And so anyway, so Bob and I talked, and then I stopped going again. And one day he just actually walked up to me and he goes, you're going straight to hell. I'm like, why? He's like, because, and by the way, it's not just Christians. Even Sikhs do this now. And this is the funny part. Because that's not even our tradition, but we're doing this now. I'm like, why am I going there? He's like, because you don't believe in, you don't do these things with me, and you don't believe in Jesus and this and that. I'm like, who's going to be in heaven? He's like, all the Christians. I said, isn't that a reason not to go there? So our people are doing the same thing as well. So all I'm trying to say is, even in religion, people are so stuck only at first level. And that's just the beginning. Most of us, when we are practicing something, and then you hear these cliches, practice makes perfect. Well, I jokingly say, what if you're practicing the wrong thing? You're not going to get perfect. You got to figure out what you're practicing. So let's apply this here in politics. Real stuff. We always have an option who to vote for. How do you really decide this? Is it party-based, generally speaking? How many of us really take time to figure out what policies this guy is after? So guess what? We are also part of the mob mentality. And we have to make decisions. We have to see, is the guy I'm voting for, what is he really inciting? I mean, I have a graphic example, but he might have to do other things. It might not be hatred, but it might be discriminatory policy. In America now they're looking at, because the Republican Party is not able to win and the demographics are changing, you know what they're doing now? They're changing the districting. This is called gerrymandering there. So we have to start looking at, oh, I mean, it's not the moderate Republicans doing it, but the others are doing it. So you have to start looking at those things. You know, it's not just about you're going to vote for Tory or Labour. You know, they're roughly the same in most cases now because that's what Tony Blair assured. But even then there are differences. And this happens at work. Are you going with a particular manager or team member because you have done enough sycophancy for them that they'll give you better promotion? Or this really is better for the company and your overall growth? These are the kind of questions you have to answer. And you cannot answer if you have not gone through that system. A system is being presented. A discipline to figure things out, wisdom to know which is what, and then making an effort, and then gracefully accepting whatever happens. And maybe you'll be, even when the worst thing happens, it won't disturb you then. That's what great individuals in the world have shown. So anything can happen. Guru Arjan Sahib is being tortured. He's not bothered because he's dealt with. And same thing, you know, we can go to St. Francis of Assisi. He's not bothered. Mother Teresa is not bothered. Ekalavya is not bothered when he's asked to cut his thumb and give. Because they have gone through it, they have developed themselves. The transactions don't matter to them anymore. The overall lifestyle matters, the overall harmony, what we are saying. Let's apply this to economics a bit, because all of us are definitely caught up in this. Well, I should have actually put a pound sign there, sorry about that. Then you're going to rhyme, dollars and cents times. Anyway, and let's look at this, because you know, it's all, the new slavery in the world is corporate slavery. Some of you have heard that from me, and you better believe it. Because it's a new way to make sure you get promoted and you really don't care whether it's ethical or not, right? So that's why on purpose I have a labor activist quote here. He said if a man has a dollar he didn't work for, guess what? Some other man worked for a dollar he didn't get. And that's what's going on. So just because you're succeeding, you know, I'm going to apply this karma here. You know, I'm not into classical karmic theory, but I'll apply it in this sense. Well, it's all going to get, you know, what goes around comes around, as they say. It's going to come around right now, this life, not previous or next. Who knows what's going to happen there? Here, you know, you're dealing with it. So, yeah, and you know how many scandals we are going through. You guys are currently going through this horsing business. People thought they were eating beef and they were eating horse meat. Anyway, the point is, because most of us are focused on this part, bottom line, and guess what happens when you're only focused on bottom line? You're focused on something for you or your company only, and ethics go out the window. And it's happening everywhere in the world. So it's not about the next dollar you are getting, it's about whose dollar you cheat out of. And let me put it in a more graphic sense from a Sikh angle. In Gurbani it says, as eating pork is for a Muslim, as eating beef is for a Hindu, for us it's eating something which does not belong to you, someone else's. So this is a very high level. See, this is why I like the way Gurbani presents it. It didn't make a law out of it, it created a principle. It says, you know, for them that's bad, for you what's bad is taking something which does not belong to you. Other people's OPP, their old song, if you guys have heard it from 90s anyway. The point is, you really got to think about the bottom line. Okay, but let's talk about relationships here. All I'm going to say here is, most relationships have become transactional. I gave enough examples about husband and wife thing, and you can apply that to spouses. The point here is, if you raise the relationship to a friend level, you will notice the transactions die. And if you remain husband and wife, father, son, whatever, and all other relationships are great, but they are not as powerful as the one with the friend is. So even at work you'll notice, you work well with certain people, you gel with them, and it becomes a very synergistic approach. And then 1 plus 1 is not 2, it could be 11 or 2013, I don't know. That depends on those individuals who are involved in it. So all this is saying is, we gotta, that old saying is, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Well, I'm saying not really, because then I have all the friends who are always in the need. We actually need to nurture relationships, not use relationships. I'll leave it at that. And that requires a lot of discipline. Otherwise, you will be, in fact, the other day, I was reading something, and a hukum came from Guru Granth Sahib, loosely translated, it means, if you are always at the receiving end, you will never have a relationship. In fact, people who are at the receiving end, they don't even know what a relationship is. And it was in context of Vaheguru and you, that we are always seeking things. And now you can apply this to your life, like between two people. If you are the one at the receiving end, it's not a bi-directional relationship. You gotta have both ways. And you have to be disciplined about it. Yeah? Otherwise you'll have arguments like, how come I have to do this all the time for you? That's how you get out of it. You have to make it bi-directional and a disciplined way. So quickly now, what I'm trying to say here on this slide is things on the left, they are the ones which matter a little bit more than the things on the right. And the reason is, abstract things, I mean, it's good to know, but who really cares? Yeah, I'm conservative, it's a label, or yeah, whatever, we all want to know what's sacred and what's not sacred. It's good to know at a doctrinal level, but what really matters is your behavior. And most of the world, including most of us, we get caught up on this side. He's atheist, he's religious. He's Sikh, he's Hindu. He is Tory, he is Labour. Whatever these, the shades are. And the left side actually is saying, I want to talk about an issue. I want to talk about whether you oppose death penalty or not. That's the issue. I don't want to know whether you're Congress or BJP in Indian context. So we don't have those conversations. And people who are developed will start having this conversation. We are all going to come from different backgrounds. We'll have different labels, but if you are a status quo person, this is where you end up. You essentially, undeveloped people end up in corruption or nepotism. Developed people counter those. That's the difference. So figure out where you want to be. You want to be in corruption. And don't think corruption is only corporate or religious. Familial relationships are corrupt. That's why we have so much tension at home. Because there is corruption there. One person gets the heavy hand all the time. So, you ask women in South Asian households, they'll tell you they're not listened to. That's corruption. Corruption is something which is not allowing things to exercise equal rights. Okay. So what do? You have to reduce the noise and overcome negativity. And what does that really mean? Essentially, I was saying that if you apply that 5 khand, and let me introduce the khand word here. In Japji Sahib, that's the process. Japji Sahib talks about 5 realms of existence. And it says, and the words are, if you know Japji Sahib, it goes from Taram, which is what I was calling discipline here, and it goes to Sach. And effort, sharam or sram, it comes from word shram in Sanskrit, which means effort. Effort is 3rd level. And this is Guru Nanak's idea on how do you develop harmony. Not my idea, I'm just trying to interpret it in today's examples and certain other things. He's saying this is how you discover truth in your life. This is how you have harmonious life. And people who are disciplined, people who have wisdom, again, they also listen to the same news, but they know what to do with it. In America we say whether you listen to Fox News, I jokingly say Fix News, or MSNBC, they are the 2 spectrums. You'll know how to navigate through the 2 to figure out what needs to get done. But you got to have your own senses built. You have to have your own filters developed. And the way to develop that filter is go through that 5 process thing. And then how do you align your things once you have developed? And let me talk about this very quickly. This is the time I'm saying once you're developed, then you can go to collective. Most of us want to change the world without having a self-development. So for example, if you yourself feel that you are a developed sovereign individual, then you will be ready to empowerment of the others. If you yourself are not ready, that you feel that you are connected and collected, you can help others. In fact, we'll end up making more mistakes. and rob other people's lives. Same thing you can apply in society. If you respect yourself and you live a dignified lifestyle, you can help others to do that. But if you yourself don't feel good about who you are, you can't help others do it. So collective is a byproduct of your own existence. Otherwise, you can be consultants where you don't have to really do what they're doing, you just go there to fix and come out. And we have way too many consultants in our personal lives and religious lives, and that's part of the problem because you're not living with them, they just come and go. You have to live with who you are. So you better start, I call it do-it-yourself kit. This is a do-it-yourself kit. You don't need consultants. Put them out of business. Anyway, you can see this. So in religion, I actually wrote introspection. To me, religious life is an introspective life. That's what I understood. So if you don't have introspection, you can't really do service, is what I'm saying. Because guess what? The seva word is a buzzword, which people mostly do it out of PR now. You can't serve if you don't have introspection. It's like what we can do, wherever there's a need, the world ends up sending them supplies of things. Sometimes they're not even needed. And we learned that, what was sent to Banda Aceh. From America, they sent 3 ships full of shorts without realizing women in Indonesia don't wear shorts. That's what happens. So we think we did seva, but nobody benefited from it. Because you yourself did introspect about it. So religious life is a life of introspection, and then you're ready to serve people. And then you figure out how to serve. Like Martin Luther served it by fighting for African American right to vote. Bhagat Pooran Singh served it by becoming an environmentalist and taking care of leprosy. Those are some ways to look at it. So everyone's service is dependent on how they're introspecting and dealing with life. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here in this one. The number one takeaway from here, if you can do it, is to go discover your purpose. We are all trained for our careers. We are not trained to discover our purpose. And most of us don't discover our purposes in life. So life becomes status quo, or whatever comes your way, you start doing it. People who figure out their purpose, we write case studies on them. The world talks about them. Whether it's Bill Gates, it was something bigger. He's created the new philanthropy. He says, I'm not interested in recognition. I'm interested in solving top 20 diseases in the world. That's why he's being talked about now. Nobody even talks about his Microsoft. They talk about his deliveries in the world now. And you can apply this to religious personalities, social work, human rights work. People have to have purpose. And I said, usually just write 3 more words. If you can do it with 1 word, you will be focused. But if you make a 2-line sentence out of it, you'll get lost. It took me more than 3 years to figure that out for myself. Because I thought, I would say I'm doing this, but it's a personal exercise. If you can do it in 1 word, I'm saying up to 3 words is great. After that, you lose your focus. Then you'll know exactly what to do. You will know what discipline you need to get. Let's say if you want to be the best, forget the best. Let's say you want to protect human rights issues in England of sex trade workers. Well, you will get the discipline. You will know exactly what to do. You'll go where to go get the knowledge. Then you'll know which firm to work with or which entity to work with. And then you'll hopefully find synergy and graceful existence there. But if you don't have a purpose, none of this will get done. Okay, I'm done. If you are bored, this is the last slide. Second last, actually. Can I get a volunteer to read this one? Now I'm bringing classical religion into it on purpose. Can I get a volunteer? Yes.
The individual is in the process of creation. It is evolving out of matter and its dual bondage of death and desire. It has to undergo transformation before it is fit for freedom. The individual being is in different stages of freedom and revolves around a wheel of births and deaths in the vortex of I-ness till it completes its development and loses itself in the being of pure spirit. When grace finally lifts it off, so to say, from the revolving wheel, then it is free. It rises above the law of causality, it attains its perfection in one moment, in one glance.
Thank you. So I like it because this is how he wrote it. I didn't change it. It says births and deaths, and I'm sure you guys have heard this about reincarnation and other things, but he's redefining them. You know, we die 1,000 times in a day and 1,000 times we are reborn. So he's getting out of that debate. I don't really care what happens to me afterwards or before. He says, I want to look at this one. He says, we basically have to undergo a transformation before we get a complete freedom. And the transformation, you can do certain things about. So don't just think that you're going to come, get caught up in the classic arguments of, is there life after death or not? Guru Nanak says, I am living when I live in remembrance. I am dead when I am in forgetfulness. So I don't know how many times in a day we die, right? Because when we forget, we make wrong decisions. Whether you're sitting at your desk when you have to decide what to do with a particular client and how to bill them, if you are connected, your billing will be accurate. And whether you're sitting at a home with your spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend or wherever you're sitting and you're cheating, your conversation will be different. And that's forgetfulness. Don't think forgetfulness is only when you're praying. It's your existence. And what he's saying is, we need, in order to get out of that, what do? You work towards transformation. And transformation applies, you have to do something again. The word harmony comes from the verb again, I talked about it. Transformation, the process, is what we have talked about. This is based out of Guru Nanak Sahib's, Japji Sahib's Panchkhand. It works for me. I apply it. You see if it works for you. It's a process available to us. There are other things available in Gurbani. This one makes so much sense to me. If I want to change the state of Sikh education, I better get disciplined about how to change it. I better figure out how curriculums are developed, how teaching methodologies are being used in the world today, and figure out how to teach. And then I have to go acquire certain knowledges. I have to go to the best people in the world who are doing it. That's how I look at it. I got to go, and 2 weeks ago I was in Mohanbir Sani. This guy is the marketing guru in the world. I'm like, tell me how this is being done. I need to learn. I spent 4 hours in his innovation lab at Kellogg. And then I'm going to the technologists at Harvard and tell me how it's done. And after I gather all that, I better go figure it out, how to apply it to the Sikh world. I'm just giving my example. And then that's where the effort kicks in. Then I better develop the team to do this. Learning is not enough myself. I have to do it every day. I have to learn it, and I have to develop the team to create prototypes to see what will work. Because I don't know what will work. I have to experiment with it for a year. That's the effort. And then you can hope for serendipity. And hopefully, when we are presenting this educational curriculums in our case, we are being truthful about it. We are not presenting it as a particular school of thought of Sikhi, whether to the best genuine effort available out of Guru Granth Sahib. So I just used one example on how you can apply this. You can do this for relationships. You can do it to make a decision of any kind with regard. This is available to us. And my question then remains, and we'll end it here. Sorry it took a little longer. What is your realm of existence? Ideally, we are doing this continuously. This is not a chronological thing, by the way. But if you are not used to doing certain things, you have to have a system. You keep applying it. But if you do it enough, you're doing it all the time. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? You stop asking, and then you start just doing it. So hopefully it gave you some ideas on how to develop. Most people don't like to talk about these things. Most people want more sexy topics. And I entertain those as well. But whatever sexy means. But I tell you, this is what the world is facing. The 99% crisis is here. The new slavery is people want to follow other people. The reason I like this is telling us not to follow anyone. Go figure out what's for you. Figure out your discipline. Figure out your purpose and work towards it. It's actually, it's emancipation. This is what Puran Singh is calling freedom. When you figure out your purpose and you work through to discover your own harmony. And then if you do that, I'm submitting to you that you become the case studies which other people study you then. Instead of us studying right now, we buy the newest bestseller, then people will write about you if you actually develop this kind of system for yourself. Anyway, questions, comments, criticisms? Yes.